This RealAg Radio episode podcast is brought to you by high-performing carbine insecticide from FMC. Carbine insecticide delivers fast, selective, and extended control of aphids in alfalfa and pulses, leaving beneficials like lady beetles to help in the fight. Ask your retailer or visit ag.fmc.com/ca today.
It's time for RealAg Radio on Rural Radio Channel 147 on Sirius XM. RealAg Radio and RealAgriculture.com is your home for insight and analysis of the issues that are impacting your farm business. Let's get real and get connected with RealAg Radio. Welcome to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio 147 at Sirius XM. Shaun Haney, your host here on the Friday edition of the show. Thanks so much, everybody, for making RealAg Radio and Rural Radio 147 a big part of your workday. And today's show is brought to you by Koch Agronomic Services. Don't put your yield at risk. Put your trust in proven solutions. Anvil Nitrogen Stabilizer, Super U Premium Fertilizer, and Tribune Nitrogen Stabilizer from Koch Agronomic Services. These products offer higher active ingredient concentrations imitator brands just can't match. You can see the difference by going to defendyourn.ca. That's defendyourn.ca. We're going to be hearing today from Koch Agronomic Services on the show. Bryce Geisel will be with us. Looking forward to chatting with him. And, of course, we've got a RealAg Issues Panel today as well. Kelvin, Heppner, Lyndsey, Smith standing by, both from RealAgriculture. Now, if you have any feedback on today's show, you can send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. You can also call the RealAg feedback line, 855-776-6147. Still broadcasting from Kansas City. I've been here at the NAMA convention all week. It's been great. It's been a lot of fun. I am full. This city just does nothing but feed you. It is incredible. Last night, Christy Bach from our team and I went out for supper, had some great Italian. If you've been to Kansas City, you know Lydia's. And we went to Lydia's last night, and Christy said she was moving there, actually. Not to Kansas City, to the restaurant. It was fantastic. Ran into some friends, old friend Janice Person from Memphis, Tennessee. It was great to see her yesterday at the restaurant. Great week in Kansas City, Missouri. And looking forward to next week being in Toronto. Yeah, it's going to be in Toronto. We have an internal RealAg team meeting. And then Thursday, going to be doing the CFA Ag Leaders Debate. Looking forward to that. We've got representatives from all the different parties that are in the federal election. I'm going to be moderating the debate. Looking forward to it. So look forward to more details about that on my socials, and we'll talk about it next week here a little bit as well. Let's take a break. When we come back, we got Bryce Geisel from Koch Agronomic Services right after this. We've got some exciting news. We have a new episode of the Pest and Predators podcast that's going to be starting here very shortly. Joined right now to chat all about it, the University of Alberta PhD student, Rachel Pizzante. You know, we've been doing the Pest and Predator podcast for a number of years now, but from your perspective, how would you explain it to the listener?
This is a chance for researchers to share their research, what they've been working on, with a broader audience and with the people who might actually benefit from the research.
What does the audience have to look forward to in Season 6 of Pest and Predators?
Well, my episode, we're going to talk about hoverflies, as well as other beneficial insects that live in field borders surrounding canola fields.
It's kind of fascinating because we talk a lot about getting inside the canopy, and we talk a lot about beneficials. But I think a lot of times we think about the crop, think about the pest. We don't necessarily think about the whole ecosystem. That's the Pest and Predator podcast, powered by WGRF. Those episodes are going to be coming out here very shortly. We'll be talking about them here on RealAgriculture.com.
Every seed starts a story at Alliance Seed. A seed holds the promise of successful harvest each year, from the first day of planting as your crop grows and navigates the challenges of weather, to the final load from the last field. It all begins with the seed you choose. Trust Alliance Seed to guide your choices by providing the expertise and information needed to match the right seed to your farm's unique potential. Start your success story with cereal and pulse varieties by visiting allianceseed.com.
Yeah, welcome back to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM. Today's show is brought to you by Koch Agronomic Services. And speaking of Koch, we've got Bryce Geisel, who's the senior agronomist with Koch Agronomic Services out of Saskatchewan. Hey, Bryce, how are we doing?
Doing well. Spring's showing up here in Regina, so things are looking good.
Slowly. Bryce, this is the time of the year where it kind of teases us. It's sort of like today's spring, tomorrow's not, back to spring. It's just, it's confusing.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, so a lot of conversations through the meeting season or conference season for both of us and for growers really across the country in North America. What seems to be in your conversations top of mind for them as they get a little bit closer here to seeding and planting time?
No, for sure. And I think, a lot of my conversations tend to revolve around fertilizer, as that's what I spend my time doing. So that tends to be where conversations go. And I think one of the things I just kind of keep reiterating and want to remind farmers is really getting the most out of those fertilizer applications this spring, because that's kind of a big piece that's going in investment and time, what they want to do with getting their crops off to a great start. And one of the things I keep kind of reminding everyone is to aim to reduce some of that nitrogen loss, because it really could be at risk even with these spring applications. And just, kind of refresh. There are three types of losses. Volatilization is kind of the biggest one we tend to see. That happens when your fertilizer is at the surface, on the surface, shallow banded. When it leaves it stays closer, that's where it's at risk. Got leaching, that's with big rainfalls, and that varies across the country. Some people deal with that more than others in terms of those big rainfalls. And finally, denitrification is the one to keep top of mind, because we're about to enter or have entered the time when we tend to see the most denitrification losses. That tends to be in that early spring timeframe.
Yeah, a lot of talk with growers through the winter. People talking about cost cutting because of profitability concerns, and where does fertilizer rate cutting happen? And I've been saying don't jump, protect the nitrogen you're putting. You have losses there too. You need to protect. So how should growers choose the product that will genuinely protect their end applications?
That is a tough question, and there's a lot of information that farmers and retailers and agronomists really do have to sort through. And one of the big things to remember is different products will have different amounts of active ingredients, which is what reduces those losses between all those different products. And there can be substantial differences between each of the products, surprisingly. And this means that not all products will perform the same, and perhaps not giving the farmers the protection they think they're getting. So they really need to ask questions about the rate of inhibitor they're using in the product that they're using to make sure that it's going to do what they want it to do for the spring.
Yeah. So speaking of the rate, why does the right rate matter when it comes to the actual nitrogen stabilizer?
So when we kind of think about the right rate, we kind of go historically. Like Agritane and Super U are the standards, but not all generics always measure up in terms of those standards. And there is a reason for this. So for registration, the CFIA guidelines include all ingredients in the product, any potential contaminants, any degradation products. And what really surprises a lot of people, farmers, agronomists, retailers across the industry, is absent from this list is efficacy. So people don't realize there is no efficacy in those guidelines for registration. So really to find out, how efficacious a product is at what rate, they really have to dive into the research and review it, because that's where they're going to find that information.
Now, when it comes to these low rate protection products, there is a lot of promises being made out there, Bryce. Big results, all your problems will be solved just by this product. How do growers actually know what to believe on this? Because it's not like killing a weed. I spray the weed dies, boom, we're good. I know it worked. This is different. How do we evaluate this?
It is different, and it is a challenge, and that's definitely something I do have to spend some time. I do spend a lot of time talking and trying to, train people and understanding, what it is, what these losses are, and how to kind of reduce them and where they might see them. But when we go back to the inhibitors, the question they need to ask is, what inhibitor is in the product? There are different types of inhibitors. How much active ingredient amount is getting used, because that is going to change depending on the active ingredient specifically. And where is the research to support those rates? Now, Koch Agronomic Services products have been and are currently being used extensively and tested across the country. Researchers use them as a standard because they work consistently and can be compared against. And we even use these same standards internally when we're kind of bringing new technology to the market. So if we think of Anvil or Cinchero, so we're always kind of going back to what we know historically has worked and the research has supported that it does work.
Okay, so if somebody wants more information about Koch Agronomic Services and the products, where do they go?
Absolutely. If you want to find out more, you can go to defendyourn.ca, and that's where you can really find all the information between some of these different products and some of the rates, and you can look at some comparisons. All that information is found there at defendyourn.ca.
Yeah, watch out for those imposters out there. There's some imitators. Bryce, it's great to have you here on the show. Thanks a lot to Koch for being today's show sponsor. Really appreciate you joining us.
All right. Thank you, Shaun.
Great stuff. Hey, we'll be right back on RealAg Radio. We've got the RealAg Issues the RealAg Issues Panel standing by, I should say. Lyndsey Smith, Kelvin Heppner joining us right after this.
Right now, people in agriculture and food are facing challenges that can feel overwhelming. If you need to talk, access the National Farm Crisis Line at 1-866-FARMS-01. That's 1-866-327-6701. It's 24/7 confidential help when you need it. Farm Credit Canada also has tools to support your long-term mental health. Learn more and access the crisis line at fcc.ca/wellness.
Get all the information you need to keep your pulse crop healthy and profitable with the Pulse School on RealAgriculture.com. The Pulse School is a free YouTube video series covering agronomy, research, and more across a host of different pulse crops. It's also available as an audio podcast wherever you download or stream your favorite podcast. Check us out on YouTube or visit RealAgriculture.com. The Pulse School, brought to you by BSF Canada.
Through a growing storm of kochia, cleavers, chickweed, and more, there's a clear path. Introducing Oxbow, a versatile cereal broadleaf herbicide that gets the job done. Powered by Duplisan technology, Oxbow is your workhorse on resistant kochia and other tough weeds. With flexibility in timing, rates, and recropping options, your path is clear. Find your way on the path of least resistance at newfarm.ca/Oxbow.
And welcome back to RealAg Radio. It's time for the RealAg Issues Panel. Of course, today's show is brought to you by Koch Agronomic Services. Make sure you go to defendyourn.ca. Let's bring in the panel. It's up first, Kelvin Heppner, coming out of Altona, Manitoba. Kelvin, feel like spring out there?
It does. This week has certainly flipped, I would say, in terms of the pressure, feeling some pressure to get ready for spring and seeding and getting into the field and getting things rolling. So pulled home some of the equipment we had parked in the field over the winter this week and starting to work on things in the yard, that type of thing. So yeah, feels like spring.
Lyndsey, you had snow this week.
Thanks for the reminder. Still looking at it. So whatevs, Kelvin. But also feeling the pressure of we have lambs due in about 3.5 weeks and no green grass yet. So
my
it's fine.
And lambs would really not like cold weather like that. Like cattle can kind of sustain the cold, but I would think lambs would be a little bit less resilient.
So there's two ways. There's sort of two things about it. One, they're just much smaller. So yes, exactly that. A cold, wet entry into the world, not ideal. At the same time, if they can be born when it's dry, wool insulates even when it's wet. So as long as you get them born and up and drinking and dry initially, they're actually really resilient. So I'm still hopeful we're going to do just fine. But I'm ready for warmth and green grass. Let's put it that way.
Well, those are first world problems, Lyndsey, compared to what some of our audience has gone through here as of late. And I'm not talking about the markets. I'm talking about the power grid. We had some listener feedback. We've had people without power for like 10 days. Talk about that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, we did. And thank you everyone for reaching out, letting us know, what's up. But yeah, like last week we were talking about, the ice storm that came through Ontario. There were still people middle of this week, and there may still be people out there that are still waiting for power. I know several farm friends in the hardest hit area, so in that Lyndsey, Peterborough, Aurelia, all that out that way, they honestly went well over a week without power. Significant damage to, I did see one farm that has a maple bush. It ruined a whole bunch of trees and all their lines and all that. Ice is just so destructive. So it's not been great as far as power outages, getting all those trees off those downlines, etc. It's been a challenge for sure. It's a good reminder, everybody, especially whether you have livestock or not, but especially then, is to be prepared for that 3 days, that 72 hours without power. And I think every time it happens, we tend to be a little bit more prepared for the next time with generators and et cetera. But it's something definitely to think about is, could you go 3 days without power and water, et cetera? And what would you do? It's good to be prepared.
Do you ever think about, like, if we were without power and water for 10 days, which one of our kids would do the best? Like, it could almost be like its own, like, reality show.
Mm-hmm. It could be.
Yeah. If I asked you, could you pick out the kid that would last the longest?
Yes, although it would depend on the criteria. So, like, who can do the best without Wi-Fi is maybe different than who can do the best without a shower for that long. So that's how it breaks down.
There's some audience members that are like, no Wi-Fi. I got a kid that wouldn't last 5 minutes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, this is what I'm saying.
There'd be some severe withdrawal.
Yeah, exactly.
If you were to ask some kids, and maybe some of our listeners, what's worse, no Wi-Fi or no food and drink for 5 days? What is
I know.
worse?
They'd probably all pick Wi-Fi. They'd be like, well, if I had Wi-Fi, I could call Skip the Dishes.
I could order Uber Eats if I had Wi-Fi.
Uber Eats. Do you deliver to the country?
Oh, anyway. That is fantastic. What hasn't been fantastic? Well, I guess it depends if you're long or short and when you were at those positions during this week. This has been kind of an interesting week in the markets. I took a finance degree from the University of Lethbridge, and I was reminded again this week about how one of my major weaknesses is trying to understand the bond market and trying to figure that out. Kelvin, there are so many different angles. We could do a whole show just on this part, but we've got the US dollar weak. We got selling off of bonds, which is increasing the yields, and it has been kind of chaos.
Yeah, and you talk about it being what, a week in the markets. This is potentially a historic week. I would say we have yet to see the full ramifications of this as it continues to unfold, but yeah, we're seeing a lot of things happen here that are the opposite of what we were told Trump and his administration were trying to do with the U.S. debt due for renewal. There was talk about how tariffs were going to help reduce interest rates by making it easier to refinance the national debt, that type of thing. Well, here we have bond market, like you said, yields rising on pace for the largest weekly increase in a quarter century, likely leading to higher consumer interest rates as that's tied in with the interest rates from local banks, and U.S. dollar, like you said, dropping dramatically, especially today versus a bunch of currencies, and that hurts the purchasing power of the world's largest consumer market. So all kinds of ugly, I'd say in a lot of cases predictable, but unintended consequences caused by the turmoil. A lot of this stemming from, of course, the tariffs and the retaliation to the Trump tariffs that continues to unfold, and we've had a bunch of different twists and turns in that roller coaster ride this week as well.
Well, we've had traders moving funds into the euro, into the yen. The Canadian dollar has benefited as we've seen the weakness in the U.S. dollar. That'll be good for U.S. exports. There's no doubt about that, as U.S. exports just became a little bit cheaper. But Lyndsey, we have a beef market update this week that people can find at RealAgriculture.com. We don't have it in this week's show. And I talked about, we've quickly turned from where we were talking about a Canadian dollar at 60 cents. And now we're talking about maybe could it be 6.75? It's been quite the turnaround. It sits right now 72 and change. So I think it's caught people off guard.
Well, and this is one of those things that, when things are working out okay. Maybe we don't pay as much attention to currency risk or currency changes as much as maybe we should. I think many within the agriculture industry were sort of expecting that the Canadian dollar was going to stay low. That, of course, benefits some of our producers. A little tougher when you're bringing things in. So a strengthening Canadian dollar actually kind of hurts us in some ways when we're talking about agriculture products. So let's just keep that in mind. These are very complicated times. And I would like to point out, Shaun, and so that listeners know what we deal with in a week. Shaun's finance degree comes out in very nerdy ways, and we have to, on our group chats, navigate Shaun's analysis of the market on a daily basis. And I will tell you, it's difficult, and everyone should pray for us. Anyway, on that
okay,
note,
I used the acronym. We got to. I said we need to watch the S&P 500 moving and declining more than 4 SD, and you were like SD. Mm-hmm. I was like standard.
I don't talk in SDs. Yeah, we don't. Normal people don't talk like that, Shaun. So, but to me, it really does speak to, like, if you're someone who lives and breathes this stuff. It has been fascinating to watch. It's also been a bit of a head scratcher. It's all those things. But for the average person, it feels very overwhelming. We've got currencies maybe doing what we didn't think they were going to do. We've got, all of this, the bond market stuff going on. It just, like, to me, this past week has just felt like just too much. Like, we've gone from uncertainty and volatility to, like, full on, people are talking depressions here. Like, it just feels like so much.
Yeah.
So much.
But okay, so I've heard a lot of people, and I actually said this on Tuesday's show, so I maybe need to take this back. I had said, don't look at your 401k and your RSPs. Okay? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But to be honest with you, maybe that's the right attitude on something like that, long-term asset, depending on how much runway you think you have in your life. But also this volatility, and you'll hear a lot of people talk about the VIX, which is basically a measure of the volatility in the market. It has been very high here over the past 2 weeks. Like usually if it gets over 30, you're like, whoa. It's been like 45 to 65. I have to look at the chart, but it's been brutal. This volatility brings opportunity. And so, okay, I just don't think you could put your head in the sand. Like, have you looked at the canola market? What's happened? And I think, Kelvin, when we have this kind of chaos and this kind of volatility, the natural tendency is I don't understand it, right? I'm not too into it. I just don't want to pay attention to it. But this is where we should really be paying attention, especially from a marketing perspective, because there could be some opportunities based on the volatility that this has created.
Yeah, volatility drives opportunities. You're right, but at the same time, as non-experts, it is a difficult time to learn. There's some real. If you're on the wrong side of a trade right now, or you have to sell it, if you feel the pressure to sell, pull the trigger at the wrong time. This is a very costly time to be learning how to do all of this. And so and then you have to keep in mind, Shaun, sure, there's money to be made on shorting the market, but at the end of the day, there are a ton of companies right now where their market cap, and this includes small businesses as well, they are worth less today than they were a week ago, than they were 2 weeks ago. And so overall, there is money lost the last couple of weeks by all this volatility. Sure, there are some people, and it sure looks like there are signs that there was some people in the options market minutes before Trump's post on Truth Social about the tariffs this week, the 90-day pause, that maybe had insider information. There are some people that made a ton of money this week on either going short or long at the right time, depending on timing. There's people that lost a ton of money, but overall, a lot of companies their value right now is less than it was just days ago, and so there is pain being felt. I'd say the net effect has been damaging so far, and when it comes to the plan that this is apparently all following, that's where this gets confusing, because I counted, or reading this week, I came up with at least 11 different reasons for these tariffs that the Trump administration has given. There's at least 11 different justifications. And so when they put the pause on this week, that meant there had to be almost as many excuses given for the walk back. And so there's just so many different messages. Nobody knows what President Trump or Scott Bessent's plans are. There's a lot of this blind faith. Oh, we have to trust Trump. We have to trust Bessent. They are geniuses. They know what they're doing. We hear this from the Ag Secretary, from Secretary Rawlins. We ought to trust President Donald J. Trump. This is the plan. Got to trust the plan. What is the plan? And if there is a plan, let's hear it. And to me, there's just a lot of blind faith that makes me question why people are standing with this, actually believing that there is a plan.
Yeah,
I have a really hard time. Yeah, I have a really hard time thinking that there is a plan that involves taking trillions of dollars out of all these pockets, unless that plan is just to put it in a very few pockets. And I hate to break it to you, but that's not. Yeah, like there is no plan. I call BS. This is just.
I think.
Well, I think there's 11 or 12.
Yeah, exactly.
I think the plan changed. I think the plan changed midweek. I'm not willing to say there's not one plan. Like Kelvin said, there's multiple plans, and I think there's undecided on which path to follow. I think Becent goes to Mar-a-Lago on Sunday. Not to get too in the weeds here, but Becent goes to Mar-a-Lago on Sunday. Heard it from Wall Street all Friday, Saturday. Well, what the heck are you guys doing with what happened to the equity market? Then there's a run on the bond market on Tuesday. There's clearly a switch of path on Wednesday. Becent wins, and the Peter Navarros of the world are the loser. Navarro has a very different tariff strategy than Becent does. And I think I would rather have, and I'm not saying like whether it's ideal or not, but I would rather have Becent guiding this ship than Lutnick or Navarro. Like Peter Navarro, park him in the trees. That is the worst case scenario for the global economy. We've got to take a break, but what I wanted to say is one of the in terms of putting, not paying attention, I had an audience member contact me this week and say, what's going to happen with canola here? We need, China has done so much harm to the market. Look how much money we've lost because of these tariffs. The person didn't know that canola is trading over $6.50, right? And we have rebounded off the lows closer to about $5.60. So this is like the staying on top of it. And he was like, oh, really? I better call my broker. So this is the staying on top of stuff to make sure that we're taking care of these opportunities. We're almost $100 higher than we were when the tariffs were put in place at the bottom. We got to take a break. We'll be back with more here of RealAg Radio, brought to you by Koch Agronomic Services.
Find everything you need for outstanding weed control in your wheat and barley from the cross-spectrum herbicide experts at Corteva. Corteva is proud to offer a wide selection of cross-spectrum herbicides for maximum convenience, effective resistance management, and customized control of your toughest grassy and broadleaf weeds. No matter what kind of weed challenges you're experiencing, we've got the right fit for your farm. Visit corteva.ca to learn more.
At Vaterstad, we aim to be the world's leading partner for outstanding emergence. We're doing that through innovative tillage, planting, and seeding equipment that's optimized for your field conditions and soil types. We also offer industry-leading capacities to help you get the job done in shorter windows of time. It's all designed to give your crop the best start possible so you can maximize yields. Vaterstad, we look forward to growing together.
Welcome back to RealAg Radio for the RealAg Issues Panel, brought to you today by Koch Agronomic Services. Defend your N like Kelvin. Go to defendyourn.ca. Okay, railways. Got to talk about this. I love transport. And there's so much other stuff going on. It seems to be it's maybe, I don't want to sound like, no one's covering this, but there hasn't been a lot of coverage of what's going on from a railway perspective. The railways are behind. Now, we do have an interview with David Shednovic from CN Rail, and big shout out to CN, always willing to talk about performance, good or bad, or concerning. He defended where they're at in terms of their railway performance, Kelvin, but we've also heard from some other groups, the wheat growers, Daryl Franzu. We posted an editorial column from him, and the Railway Association as well. So what's at work here? How bad is it? Is it that bad?
Well, I think we're talking about both short-term and long-term issues here. Short-term, the railways have had some challenges this year. Look at the Ag Transport Coalition numbers. Hopper car fulfillment on a weekly basis has been quite poor through February, March, associated with the cool weather. CN Rail and CPKC, as David talked about in that interview, they always dispute those Ag Transport Coalition numbers, that they aren't the best metric for measuring performance, and that they've actually been moving record amounts of grain. So, there are certainly some issues, though, where elevators are not getting the trains on time that they expected to get. So farmer deliveries are being delayed into spring here, maybe a month or two later than what they were supposed to be or what they were contracted for, that kind of thing. In the long term, though, and this is what Daryl's article, Daryl is the chair of the Canadian, the Wheat Growers Association, used to be the Western Canadian Wheat Growers Association, and they're talking about the need for investment in our rail infrastructure, including specifically at the Port of Vancouver, and how Canada's red tape and all the different approvals are making Canadian exports not competitive in the long run compared to other countries. And he cites the construction of a new port in Peru, for example, and the timeline that it took to conceive and build a new port from start to finish being way less than it takes to just get through some of the consultation stage here in Canada for a container port expansion that's happened, the Roberts Bank 2 project at the Port of Vancouver. And so, yeah, I think a lot of this is driven by our issues on the trade front right now, where Canada's needing to look at exporting overseas and diversifying our trade away from the U.S. And so that makes the Port of Vancouver even more critical, and our export pipeline capacity even more critical. And of course, with the federal election underway, this should be something that candidates are talking about. In some cases, they are, maybe not to the extent that we'd like to hear as people working in an agriculture or in an export reliant sector industry like Canadian agriculture.
Yeah, I kind of agree with Daryl in the sense of we got to create some action. I was on the Ryan Jesperson show, Real Talk, his YouTube show out of Edmonton on, because it was yesterday.
Looked like he got going.
He did. He got, I've known him for a long time, and he knows how to just wind me up. I'll even say to myself, don't get wound up. Don't get wound up. And he just he knows. And I'm like, I'm doing so well. I haven't been wound up. And then boom, Shaun goes crazy. I said that we were constipated on thought. He loved that phrase. But kind of what Daryl's saying is that, hey, at a time where elbows are up and we're talking about all these things we got to do, action, Lyndsey. That's what has to happen here.
Yeah, and it is not, certainly in the last little while, what we've been known for. So I completely see where you can get fired up about these things, because ultimately I know that right now what is happening in the U.S. is using up so much of the oxygen in the room. Sure. But within all of this is still the reality that Canada continues to be an export nation. That is always going to be what we are for the foreseeable future. And we haven't been seriously looking at how do we grow that part and keep our ports up to date, expand them, invest in infrastructure, etc. Like, this is not a new conversation. But I, for one, I am glad to see that we are having people talking about it, trying to make it an issue in this election, or trying to make it an issue for Canadians overall, so that whoever does form government in a couple weeks does have this on their radar. Because ultimately, amidst all this chaos, there's two things. One, there's still the job that we have been doing in exporting what we already have. But then there's all of the other parts of the opportunity of shifting trade flows and where we may actually find we have to send more things out or bring different things in. And we have our West Coast that is obviously incredibly important. There's been more talk about the Port of Churchill, which we seem to get a new announcement every 2 weeks. There's Thunder Bay, Montreal, etc. Like, we are a nation that needs to move product. And so rail is obviously such a huge part of that, and the port infrastructure. And we just haven't seemed to be serious about actually doing anything about it. And so I'm glad to see that we're having these conversations.
I agree with you. Kelvin, are you bullish Churchill?
Great question.
I'm a little bit jaded, I'd say. I don't know. I used to be bullish Churchill. The narrative made a lot of sense to me as to the future of Churchill as an export port. But I think we've seen hundreds of millions of dollars of public money put into it over the last couple decades, and very, very little to yield in terms of outcome so far. Maybe in 50 to 100 years, it might make more sense if climate changes and that type of thing. But there's actually some talk about a port somewhere else on further south in Hudson Bay, less issues with the muskeg and the swamp that rail line has to run through to get to Churchill. And so maybe that shows more promise. I'm not sure. It would be an amazing outlet if we could have access to true legitimate access to ocean through the Hudson Bay as well. That would be huge for the Canadian economy.
Yeah, for some of our American listeners, like, I've never heard of this Churchill. The equivalent is how much money has been put into potential of the Port of Churchill is equivalent to how much money USDA has put into getting high-speed internet to all rural areas. It's just millions and millions of dollars, and that it sort of just go poof.
And like Lyndsey said, there's another announcement. The Liberal government a couple of months has made a bunch of announcements. The Manitoba government is announcing investment in it, and sure, they are seeing some opportunities with critical minerals, some other commodities. Right. Over the years, there's been talk about exporting oil and energy products from Alberta across the Northern Prairies through Churchill. And in the past, the Canadian Wheat Board, of course, was the main tenant and driver of business through Churchill. When the Wheat Board went away, that's when Churchill really went downhill quickly, and went actually a couple of years without a season without much business. And so it's at least a season, I should say. Maybe in the long term, Churchill has potential, but it's difficult to see it in the short term, based on in the political cycle type term.
What did we ever do with those Lakers? Did we turn them into like cruise ships or anything like that? Anyway, remember those Lakers?
Oh, they're still in use.
Are they?
Algoma, those Lakers are still being used on the Great Lakes. Yeah, G3 runs them. G3 is part of part of buying the Wheat Board business. I'm pretty sure they got.
Lyndsey, remember those good old days of being able to cover those kind of stories? Man,
yeah,
those are just
new boats,
calmer times.
Yeah.
Canadian election.
What?
Yeah, it's still on. We're halfway through.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
We've got debates next week. We're going to be able to see how bad Carney's French is. We'll be able to see how aggressive Pierre Poilievre is. Like, do they try to pull him back a little bit, or does he try to bury Carney? And does burying Carney in the debate actually hurt him at the end of the day? I guess, Lyndsey, right now, David Coletto wrote a piece that it's not over. But boy, more and more of the data and the polling shows it may be over.
Well, and so you mentioned we're halfway through. So we are. There's still a bit, there's half the campaign to go. And ultimately, the poll that matters the most, as everyone will say, is the one on when people go in and actually cast their ballot. I think what's maybe in some ways kind of frustrating is that I feel like there were all these, changes, and the NDP lost all this, and the Liberal gained all the strength, and we've kind of settled into where we often find ourselves. And so, does that mean that a Liberal win is in the bag? No, it doesn't actually. But it also doesn't mean the Conservatives can necessarily win. We are in this strange spot that whatever happens in the next few weeks could very well shift us from, let's say, either party with a majority or potentially a minority of either. We are sort of in that in between. And a lot of that will depend on exactly that. What happens in Quebec, what happens with the NDP. If people who said they were going to vote Liberal feel like the Liberal win is in the bag, they may go back to voting NDP, which actually benefits the Conservatives. Like, there's a lot of moving pieces here that can actually change the outcome. I think what I was probably most disappointed this week is that we seem to get away from any real discussion of leadership and platforms and what leaders are going to do. And there was arguments about people's resumes, and there was mudslinging, and they're just, again, and I know it's politics, and maybe my bar is too high, but we really are in an incredible moment right now to shift gears and actually, have a vision for what we're going to do with all the shifting relationships around the world and US and et cetera. And we were arguing over people's resumes. And now the NDP has gone to, hey, we still want to be at least vocal in Parliament. They're just begging for seats now. It's just the most disappointing kind of week, I think.
Well, next week, the Canadian Federation of Agriculture, the CFA, is hosting their, I was going to say annual, but they do it every election. I think they've been doing that for 40 years. This goes back a long time they've been doing this, where they have representatives from each of the major parties, and there's an agricultural debate. And that's going to be happening on Thursday in Ottawa. Looking forward to being able to moderate that, being one of the co-moderators for the second time. So looking forward to that. So we'll have more details that next week on the show, as well as on the Real Agriculture socials as well. Now, Kelvin, you have a theory. You're wondering, are the scale and size of these Pierre Poilievre town halls in these warehouses, huge crowds, are they actually hurting the CPC. What's at work here? What's your thoughts?
Yeah, I actually think there's a strong argument here to be made that these massive rallies, sure, they are at unprecedented scale, at least for the last couple decades in Canadian politics, maybe going back to the 70s, when Pierre Trudeau held rallies at Maple Leaf Gardens, that type of thing. They are large, they are impressive in terms of turnout, but I wonder whether the net effect to the Conservative Party and Pierre Poilievre's electability is negative from these rallies because because of how Trump-like it looks. People in Canada, voters in Canada, are extremely turned off by Trump, and so the fact he's talking about rally size, the fact it's all about size matters, and the talking points he brings up in his speeches at these rallies, the clips that come out of it, it looks a lot like Republican rallies of the last electoral couple cycles in the U.S. And so, to me, the other thing is the crowd at these rallies are the most hardcore conservatives, and the talking points that appeal to them are not the talking points that appeal to the Canadians that the Conservative Party needs to attract. And so he's leaning into these talking points that appeal to the base, and that doesn't necessarily attract more votes in that direction. And it's all about the leader. It's all about it shows that there is an extremely strong base, but it's I'm not sure that it's attracting more votes in terms of the overall public perception.
Okay, so I don't believe, and I said this on Jesperson's show, I do not believe that Pierre Poilievre is MAGA. Okay?
Oh, I don't either. No,
but basically what is a conservative to do? So basically, as long as there is a MAGA movement in the U.S., conservatives are essentially unelectable. That's almost what the message is.
I completely disagree.
No. Look at Doug Ford.
Yep.
Doug Ford's not a true conservative.
Not a conservative. Whoa.
No,
back up. Not a conservative.
But he's got the name in his party.
And brilliant article that was shared this week is MAGA conservative?
It's not.
No,
it's
but
not.
I'm talking about what is the Conservative Party supposed to do as long?
So 2015 Conservative Party, when Justin Trudeau was holding huge rallies across Canada, Conservative Party at the time, definitely in trouble, and there's a lot of parallels being drawn between that election campaign and this election campaign as we get closer to voting date at this point. At least that's the way the trends are going. At that time, Conservative Party would have said, door knocking, let's put those resources into door knocking, talking to people at their front door, much more important than having these big rallies. Who cares about the cost and turnout to these big rallies, spending money on that cost? Let's focus on connecting with Canadians at their front door. And that's, I think, an approach the Conservatives could, and I know they are door knocking, they are running intense door knocking campaigns right now too, but it's still, I think that type of approach, there is a different approach here, Shaun, that Conservative parties can take than the one that Poilievre and his team are taking.
Hey, we got to take a break. We've got more coming up here on RealAg Radio, brought to you by Koch Agronomic Services.
If you're applying a low-rate N stabilizer, you might be falling for a losing strategy. Low-rate products promise great results, but may lack the potency of higher active ingredient concentrations, so great isn't always what you get. Don't put yield at risk. Put your trust in proven solutions. Anvol Nitrogen Stabilizer, Super U Premium Fertilizer, and Tribune Nitrogen Stabilizer from Koch Agronomic Services. These products offer higher active ingredient concentrations imitator brands can't match. See the difference at defendyourn.ca.
The Canola School on RealAgriculture.com is your one-stop shop for everything a canola grower needs. Check out our free video series on YouTube for all the latest in canola agronomy, research, marketing, and more. Don't have time to watch? Download the podcast version of the Canola School on RealAgriculture.com or anywhere you download your podcasts. Stay on top of all things canola with the Canola School on RealAgriculture.com, brought to you by BASF and Invigor Hybrid Canola.
And welcome back to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio 147, brought to you by Koch Agronomic Services. Well, it was an interesting commercial break. We had a lot of accusations flying all over the place, back and forth. These two people are not very nice to the host of this show. And we have lots of fun around here. Lyndsey, sorry, you want to continue the conversation about the election? Go ahead.
Oh, there's so many things I want to say, but I need to put this one out there. So first of all, one of the things we were talking about is winning an election, right? And I will say my assessment is Pierre Poilievre is not politicking enough. He is doubling down on who he is and his party and what, and that may be very admirable. It doesn't win an election. But here is my what if to the two of you, because we've talked about this in our household quite a bit this week. Imagine that Pierre Poilievre wins, okay? Does Mark Carney seem like the person to you that would actually be interested in being leader of the opposition?
No. Steps down immediately.
So that I agree. Now, the reverse is, okay, let's say Pierre Poilievre does not win. Does he step down immediately?
So I have heard, I think the Line talked about this a couple weeks ago, and Liberal majority, yes. Liberal minority, no.
Stays?
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
Interesting.
They actually thought, if I remember correctly, they thought a conservative minority win was a threat to his leadership. Like that would not go over very well. They thought that a liberal minority win may be better for his cause than a conservative minority win, which I thought was kind of interesting. I don't want to get too in the weeds in that, but Kelvin, what do you think?
I think he stays. I'm in all of those scenarios, and sure there would be some backstabbing, and I'm just not sure right now where that comes from. The Ontario Doug Ford camp certainly would be vocal, but I don't know if they have enough control over the party right now to push Poilievre out. And so Poilievre won that leadership race with such sweeping numbers that there's a lot of people that have declared loyalty to him. I'm not sure who the competing, you need somebody to lead a competing force inside the party to knock him off, and I'm not sure where that Doug Ford would be a potential person there, but I'm not sure that he has the momentum in the party from what I've heard. So yeah, I don't know. I'm curious whether the Conservative Party, that whole coalition, how well it holds together and how many people break off in terms of the PCs,
ding, 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 ding,
wing, and separating from the old Reform wing, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, I think that's also to add on to Lyndsey's great question. I think that's the next question. If there is a liberal majority government, which right now, that probably is the odds-on favorite.
That could happen.
Could happen, very likely. What happens to the Conservative Party? Do we have a break where we have the Western Canadian, or essentially the Prairies Conservative Party, and we have the Ontario Conservative Party? Maybe the whole thing functions better if that was to happen. I don't know, but there's clearly a rift between the.
They don't win elections. They don't. Well, they never win an election that way. So
coalition, I guess, at some point. But yeah,
parties may function better, but they don't form government.
Yeah. Well, it doesn't look like they're forming government this way either, Kelvin. So there you go.
With the Gate project. We probably should hit on that. Gate got, this is the Cereals Canada initiative to basically build a building, or I guess take over a building, and Siggy-like, but I would say bigger intentions than just Siggy. And they got some big funding this week, Kelvin. What happened?
Speaking of potential frontrunners in future national political parties, Wab Kinew, the Premier of Manitoba, who I think is a frontrunner if he wants the job to replace Jagmeet Singh as leader of the NDP after this election, announced, the Premier of Manitoba, along with the Ag Minister, Ron Kostishin, and some other ministers, were at Cereals Canada yesterday to announce $13 million right now. They called it a down payment towards this facility. It's a $102 million projected cost. Farm groups themselves have also put $13.5 million in. Cereals Canada has put $5 million, I believe. So I think they're at around the $32 million mark with this. But the Manitoba Premier did say that the province wants to be cover 1/3 of the cost if this all goes ahead, with the federal government covering 1/3 and industry covering 1/3. And so this is supposed to, like you said, Shaun, be a new hub for promoting the export, the use, technical support of Canadian crops around the world, replacing that legacy of Siggy, the Canadian International Grains Institute, that emerged into Cereals Canada a few years ago. And so, yeah, they're trying to build this facility in downtown Winnipeg. $102 million and $13 million injection from the province yesterday, but he did say that they are hoping to cover up to 1/3 if the federal government and industry step in. So the big question mark now is whether the federal government will find that $30+ million to put into the project. And I would say, compared to half a year ago when it looked like the Conservatives would win, that there would be budget cuts across the board. The prospect today, when it looks like we might have a Liberal government and trade promotion and export promotion development is much higher on the radar in the political discourse list of political priorities, I'd say they probably have better odds of getting that money from the federal government today than they did 6 months ago.
You know, Lyndsey, on, I can't remember if it was Tuesday or Wednesday show, we had Tyler McCann and Elizabeth was it Wednesday?
I think so.
From Cappy. And we talked about, they put out a report on the future of AFC spending.
Yep.
I think it's an interesting discussion. Whether it's a conservative government or it's a Liberal government, what does the funding look like for the department going forward? Where would you increase funding? Where would you decrease funding? And what are some of the priorities?
Right. And I think it's an intelligent question to ask, is not just total dollars, but what are we doing? Right? So where are those dollars being spent? What is the outcome? What outcomes have we managed in the last 10 years? What outcomes do we want to get to? And I think that there's a pretty valid question there, because we've certainly seen some of the reviews of what AEFC has put money into in the last little while came out and basically said some of this programming was incredibly ineffective. So, you know, it's one thing to say, hey, we have to cut our budget. It's another to say, hey, maybe we just need to redeploy some of this money elsewhere that's actually effective for the things we want to do. So I think it's an important conversation to have. I think it has to be more than just budget cutting. I'd like to see, I agree with, you know, the premise from Cappy that, you know, let's think about where we actually want to go, how we want to get there, and are we funding the things that get us there? And so, you know, even this question of GATE, I mean, so it's over $100 million. And if the feds are going to chip in $30 million, if, you know, the provinces, is new bricks and mortar where that money goes furthest? Like, that's a question. I'm not sure that, you know, that $30 million is best spent on bricks and mortar and that sort of stuff. So that to me is one of those questions, is if you're going to commit those kind of funds, do they get you to where you want to be? And, you know, maybe they are, but I think that's the lens that we have to actually look through.
Well, but I think, you know, is that kind of a Trump bump effect where it's easier for the federal government to dish out those dollars because we're talking so much about diversifying trade, and that's what the building is all about, trade, and the project's all about, like, I think it enhances their chances of getting that money.
Look at the campaign promises that are being made. Look at, I'm sure whoever forms government, their first budget will be about increasing investment in exports to other countries, decreasing reliance on the U.S. market. That is extremely popular politically right now in Canada, and so to me, it's definitely leapt up the list of priorities for whoever forms federal government.
Yeah, you know, not to belabor the point, but you know, when I was on Real Talk, there was a part of the opening, like they showed some past interviews that people have been saying over the past number of shows. Like, you know, you get the kind of the promo lead in, and there was a gentleman on there, I don't know who it was, who said, like, the clear message is here: Europe is Canada's friend, and that's where the future is economically. It's just sort of like, well, we're do a lot more business. If that is the case at only $35 billion. This point, or a reduction in standard of living. There's that too, I guess. We could all for the great.
Hey, we might get both, so that's great.
What?
Anyway.
Oh goodness. Oh goodness.
I don't know. If I follow it, so back to our original conversation. If I were to believe most of what I heard this week on financial markets, that is what we're getting. We're getting stagflation, which is the worst of both. So happy Friday, everybody. Anyway, I'm trying really hard not to get completely sucked into like the bog of despair, but it's hard with all this stuff going on.
So I think it's important through earnings season, from an equity market perspective, it's important through earnings season to see not only what the earnings are, but more importantly, probably where the forecasts are through the end of the year. We saw Delta Airlines earlier this week say, like, we're taking all of our forward-looking statements. Like, part of being a publicly traded company, you just say, here's what our earnings were, and here's what we're forecasting. They removed theirs off the table because of some of that uncertainty. But yeah, Kelvin.
Yeah.
When you go dark like that doesn't reduce the uncertainty.
It doesn't.
Increases.
Really doesn't.
You know, it doesn't. But there's reasons why the board would do that, right? So yeah. They're being prudent as well. Okay, so on RFD TV this morning, I was asked, hey, okay, so we were talking U.S.-China trade war. What are you watching for? And my thought is, I think it's important that Xi and Trump talk. That happens here over the weekend. I think that'll give the market, just them talking will give the market some encouragement, some pause. It'll remove, I think, a little bit of potentially some of the volatility. Now, if the outcome is kaboom, from a discussion standpoint, that will be a little bit different. But I don't know. What are you kind of watching for here, Lyndsey?
If they play golf or not.
They're not going to play golf. I don't think she golfs.
I think that's really important that they golf, because apparently that's
Trump doesn't lose it. So
yeah.
He is the lowest handicap of any president. He is I think he's like a 3 or 4.
Can we focus on the important things here? Anyway,
I wish I was a 3 or a 4. I'm more like a 24. Yuck.
Anyway,
he's really a 3 or 4.
Yeah,
I don't know
the swing.
Well, look at Charles Barkley swing. I don't know. I have no idea. I haven't golfed with him.
Anyway, I think they should golf. I feel like that would mean that things are good.
Well, speaking of golf, it's the Masters. That's this weekend, which is one of the greatest, made for TV event. Looking forward to. Oh yeah. There is nothing more after this kind of market activity. There is nothing more calming and therapeutic than golf on TV.
Than a nap watching golf on TV.
Exactly.
Jim Nantz.
A couch nap.
Jim Nantz just a lullaby. Welcome, friends.
God. We do very different things on the
Championship Sunday. Oh, the calming. But no Vern Lundquist. Wish Vern was on the call, too. Okay. Kelvin, have yourself a great weekend.
Thank you. Take care, everyone.
I worked in sports. I promised everybody. Lyndsey, have yourself a great weekend as well.
You as well.
If anybody has any feedback, thoughts, comments, something made you irate, we'd love to hear from you. You can send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. You can also call the RealAg feedback line, 855-776-6147. That's it. Whole week broadcasting from Kansas City. Next week, we're in Toronto. I'm headed to the airport right now to hop on a flight. And, of course, like I mentioned, that Ottawa CFA Ag Leaders Debate on Thursday. So make sure you stay tuned for more info on that. Thanks, everybody, for getting real and getting connected with RealAg Radio. We'll chat again next week. Cheers.
Thank you for downloading this RealAg Radio episode, brought to you by hard-performing carbine insecticide from FMC. Carbine insecticide hits aphids hard with effective, selective, extended control. It also has activity on lygus and tarnished plant bugs. Ask your retailer or visit ag.fmc.com/CA today.